Joining me now is my colleague, Reverend Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC. Hey, Rev, I'm glad you're here, and also glad for our viewers to know you're going to have Jim Clyburn. He's on your show coming up in about an hour and 20 minutes, so that's pretty cool. But what he's doing is calling for the debate to end, Rev. But he did say there he'd be supportive if Biden stepped aside. He would support Kamala Harris. Do you think the public debate over this needs to end? And privately, should these conversations with Biden continue?
I think the debate is all right if it's within the boundaries of seeking for what is best for the country and where we're going. I mean, when you hear, as you just had the general on, when you hear what is going on around the world and who can handle world crisis and then domestic issues that all of us are concerned about. We need to make that the goal, and who can best serve, who is best demonstrated, since we're dealing with two people in President Biden and former President Trump, who has both served, and see what their agendas are. I think that a lot of the age questions that have been raised, though they may be legitimate, I think that they are being far overblown because we're talking about two men who are roughly the same age, who have roughly shown some flaws in public. I think Donald Trump has fumbled more words, more lines, and more situations than President Biden has. So I think when we hear someone of the high esteem of Congressman Clyburn raise that issue, it is not out of bounds. I intend to explore that with him on our show this evening.
Okay, good. We'll look forward to that. This is an interesting perspective, sir, and it comes from Ernest Owens, who wrote that black voters should be the ones to decide if Biden continues to run, saying black voters are more risk averse because they recognize that their livelihoods are the ones most likely to be under threat if things go wrong. No members of the Congressional Black Caucus have called for the president to exit the race. Does Biden really appear to be less of a risk?
I think if you give the record, what President Biden has done, record unemployment among blacks, what he has done in terms of standing up for student debt loan, where he's put a black woman on the Supreme Court, a black woman as vice president, where he's aggressively stood for affirmative action. When Trump stacked Supreme Court ended affirmative action, where he stood up for criminal justice reform. When we couldn't get the Senate to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, when George Floyd was killed and it raised an international outrage, and Donald Trump was president and said nothing. In fact, he went in front of a church across from the White House holding up a Bible denouncing the protesters, whereas Joe Biden gave an executive order around George Floyd Justice and Policing when the Senate wouldn't vote it as law. I think that clearly black voters have a vested interest in protecting their interests. This is not about who's winning a beauty contest or an age contest, since they're around the same age. This is about every group in America, including and especially blacks, have to protect their interests. And Donald Trump has shown nothing but outright hostility to indifference around black issues.
And lest we forget, when Donald Trump was there in front of St. John's Church there off of Lafayette Park, he was holding that Bible up upside down. There was just a level of disrespect, dishonor having done so. But let me ask you about this. The Democrats who've made it clear that Vice President Harris would be Biden's replacement, I mean, if it's not completely clear already, would black voters be more willing to have Biden step aside if she were guaranteed to be his replacement?
I think that if there is an urgency or an emergency, that Kamala Harris has proven she can step in. And the one that led that charge was Joe Biden. He chose her to be his vice presidential candidate. So I don't know why everyone is acting like we're choosing between Biden and Harris when he chose Harris. The fact that she is vice president means that the president feels if there was some situation, he feels she is most qualified to fill that role. I was one of them that was urging him when he had already committed to a black on the Supreme Court, a black woman. I urged him to put a black woman on the ticket. He said that publicly, that we helped to urge him to do that. He did it. And he did it making a statement she was qualified. So the issue is not Biden or Harris. The issue is Biden or Trump at this point. If somewhere down the line it becomes different, I think that he has said that he has confidence in Kamala Harris, who is now the vice president and has been a good one.
Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned, Jim Clyburn on your show coming up in just a little bit. What are you going to be listening for in his answers? Do you want direct answers? Do you want nuanced answers? What do you think he's going to say?
I have no idea what he's going to say. No one could tell Jim Clyburn what to say, but I want direct answers, and he's always talked to me directly. I will remember, as if it was yesterday, that we had gone to South Carolina, to Charleston, for the debate of all of the presidential candidates in the primaries. And the next morning, National Action Network, which I am president of, had a ministers' luncheon, about 300 ministers. All of the candidates came to speak. Clyburn came with President Biden, well, now President Biden. He was then candidate Biden. And he pulled me aside because some of the civil rights community was going with some of the opponents. And he said, Al, I want you to know straight up, before you finish your breakfast, later today, I'm endorsing Joe Biden. And I said, really? Which kind of froze me from doing some other things. And he's always been direct with me. I believe he'll be direct tonight in saying what he feels and what he wants to see all voters, particularly black voters, to do or not do. Whether we agree with it or not, you're going to get a straight answer from our congressman. He might be congressman from South Carolina, but he's been a congressman to all of us around the country, Jim Clyburn.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.